"Sir, that's my mother in this photo," said the beggar to the millionaire whose wife had disappeared. The autumn wind whistled through the empty streets of Boston as Alexander Thorne stood beneath a flickering streetlight, his trembling hands smoothing yet another missing person poster against the cold metal pole. His wife Sarah's radiant smile beamed back at him from the photograph, her green eyes sparkling with the same warmth that had captured his heart 8 years ago. The date beneath the image, missing since November 15, 2022, felt like a dagger twisting in his chest. At 45, Alexander had achieved everything society deemed worthy of success. A thriving investment firm, a magnificent brownstone in Beacon Hill, and more wealth than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. Yet here he was at 5 in the morning, plastering posters across the city like a man possessed. His expensive wool coat, now wrinkled and stained from his daily ritual, hung loosely on his frame, a testament to the 30 pounds he'd lost since Sarah vanished. "Mr. Thorne?" A security guard from a nearby building approached, recognition flickering across his face. "Sir, I've seen you out here every morning this week. Maybe you should get some rest." Alexander managed a weak smile, one that never reached his eyes. "Thank you, James, but I can't. I can't." He pulled another poster from his leather messenger bag, moving toward the next lamppost. The guard's concerned gaze followed him, but Alexander had grown accustomed to such looks. His board members wore the same expression during meetings, watching. Their once sharp CEO struggled to maintain focus as he obsessively checked his phone for news about Sarah. A light drizzle began to fall, causing the ink on the posters to run slightly. Alexander cursed under his breath, quickening his pace. He had to finish his route before the morning commuters flooded the streets. Experience had taught him that people were more likely to notice the posters when they weren't rushing to work. He rounded the corner onto Charles Street, his phone buzzed. His heart leaped as it did every time, but it was just another message from his sister Elena. "Alex, please call me. We're worried about you." He ignored it, just as he'd ignored the countless other well-meaning messages from family and friends who thought it was time for him to move on. How could he move on when every fiber of his being told him Sarah was still out there? The police had found no body, no evidence of foul play, nothing to suggest she wouldn't walk through their front door tomorrow with a perfectly reasonable explanation for her 3-year absence. The rain intensified, and Alexander ducked under the awning of an antique shop. His fingers traced the edge of a fresh poster lingering on Sarah's face. He remembered that day perfectly, their 7th wedding anniversary celebrated at their favorite vineyard in Napa Valley. Sarah had worn a flowing white sundress, her honey blonde hair catching the golden California light. She'd been especially quiet that weekend, almost melancholic, though she'd insisted nothing was wrong when he'd asked. Now, looking back, he tortured himself with every detail, every slight change in her behavior in the weeks before she disappeared. The late-night phone calls she'd take in whispered tones, the way she'd started keeping her personal laptop locked with a new password, the mysterious weekend trips to visit an old college friend she'd never mentioned before. Thunder rumbled overhead as Alexander continued his journey, turning onto Beacon Street. The early morning darkness was starting to lift, revealing the first hints of dawn. He'd grown to hate sunrise. Each new day was just another reminder of his failure to protect the woman he loved. A gust of wind tore one of the posters from his hand, sending it dancing down the sidewalk. Alexander chased after it, his Italian leather shoes splashing through puddles. The paper skittered around a corner and into an alley, where a small figure huddled against the wall. Alexander slowed his approach, not wanting to frighten what appeared to be a homeless person seeking shelter from the rain. But as he bent to retrieve the wayward poster, a tiny voice stopped him in his tracks. "That's my mama." He froze, certain he'd misheard. Turning slowly, he found himself face to face with a girl who couldn't have been more than 12 or 13. Her clothes were ragged, her dark hair matted with rain, but it was her eyes that caught his attention. Familiar green eyes that seemed to pierce straight through him. "What did you say?" Alexander whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. The girl pointed a dirty finger at Sarah's photograph. "That's my mama. she repeated, more firmly this time. I know it is. She's wearing the necklace. Alexander's gaze dropped to the girl's neck, where a silver chain disappeared beneath her threadbare jacket. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out, revealing a distinctive pendant he knew all too well. A small silver compass rose with a tiny emerald at its center, his world tilted on its axis. The pendant was identical to the one Sarah had worn every day since before they met, the one she'd claimed was a family heirloom. She'd been wearing it the day she disappeared. Where did you get that?" he managed to ask, though his throat felt like it was closing up. The girl clutched the pendant protectively. "Mama gave it to me before they took me away. She said as long as I had it, I'd always be able to find my way back to her." Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Why do you have pictures of my mama? What did you do to her?" Alexander felt his knees weaken, and he had to lean against the alley wall for support. The girl's accusation hit him like a physical blow, but it was the implications of her words that truly staggered him. Sarah had never mentioned having a child. In all their years together, through countless late-night conversations and intimate confessions, she had never once hinted at being a mother. The girl was still staring at him, her expression a mixture of fear and defiance. Despite her obvious distrust, she made no move to run away. Perhaps she too sensed that this moment was somehow crucial, that their chance meeting in this rain-soaked alley was more than mere coincidence. "My name is Alexander," he said softly, trying to keep his voice steady. I was Sarah's husband, and I've been looking for her for a very long time." The girl's eyes widened, and she took a small step forward, the pendant glinting in her hand. "You're lying," she said. But there was uncertainty in her voice now. "Mama she couldn't..." But whatever she was going to say was cut off by the sudden blare of a car horn from the street. The girl startled like a frightened animal, backing away into the shadows of the alley. "Wait," Alexander called out, his voice echoing off the wet brick walls. "Please, I just want to talk." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his wallet, extracting a photograph he always carried with him. "Look, this is us together, Sarah and me, at our house." The girl hesitated, curiosity warring with distrust on her face. Slowly, she edged back toward him, her eyes fixed on the photograph. It showed Alexander and Sarah standing in front of their Christmas tree the previous year, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling at the camera. "That's our home on Beacon Hill," Alexander continued gently. "Sarah lived there with me for 7 years before she went away. Please, what's your name?" "Lucy," she whispered, still staring at the photo. "My name is Lucy Martinez." She looked up at him, her green eyes, Sarah's eyes, filling with tears. "If you're really married to my mama, why didn't she ever tell me about you? Why didn't she come find me?" The questions hit Alexander like physical blows. He had no answers, only a growing awareness that everything he thought he knew about his wife was built on shifting sand. "Lucy, I don't know, but I want to understand. Maybe we can help each other figure out what happened. Are you hungry? There's a diner around the corner that opens early." Lucy wrapped her arms around herself, considering his offer. "I'm not supposed to go anywhere with strangers," she said, but her growling stomach betrayed her. "You're right to be careful," Alexander agreed. "How about this? The diner has big windows facing the street. We can sit where everyone can see us, and you can leave anytime you want. I need to understand about Sarah, about your mother." After what felt like an eternity, Lucy nodded. Alexander led her to Jerry's all-night diner, where the early morning crowd consisted of a few tired-looking hospital workers and an elderly couple. They chose a booth by the window, and Alexander noted how Lucy positioned herself with a clear view of both exits. The waitress raised an eyebrow at Lucy's bedraggled appearance, but said nothing as she handed them menus. Lucy ordered pancakes, eggs, bacon, and hot chocolate, while Alexander asked for coffee, black. As Lucy devoured her breakfast, Alexander studied her features, seeing Sarah in every angle of her face. How had he never noticed that the compass rose pendant Sarah wore so faithfully was actually a matching set? How many other secrets had his wife kept buried beneath her perfect surface? "How long have you been on the streets, Lucy?" he asked carefully, watching her scrape the last bits of syrup from her plate. "A few months," she admitted. "I ran away from my foster home. They weren't bad people or anything, I couldn't stay there anymore. Not after I found out the truth." "What truth?" Lucy reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope, sliding it across the table. "I found this in my social worker's office when she stepped out to take a phone call. I know I shouldn't have looked, but it had my name on it." Alexander opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter dated just 6 months ago, written in handwriting he would have recognized anywhere. Sarah's handwriting. "My dearest Lucy," it began, "if you're reading this, something has gone very wrong. I never wanted to leave you, not when you were a baby and not now. But sometimes we have to make impossible choices to protect the ones we love. The compass rose I gave you isn't just a necklace. It's a key to understanding everything. Keep it safe, and when the time is right, you'll know what to do with it. All my love, Mama." Alexander read the letter 3 times, his coffee growing cold beside him. "Lucy, this letter, it's dated after Sarah disappeared. She must have arranged for it to be delivered to your social worker's office. But why? And what does she mean about the pendant being a key?" Lucy touched the necklace instinctively. "I don't know. I've looked at it a million times, but it's just a normal necklace, see?" She unclasped it and handed it to Alexander. He turned the silver compass rose over in his hands, remembering how Sarah would often sit at their kitchen table, absently spinning it between her fingers when she was deep in thought. Now, looking at it properly for the first time, he noticed something odd about the weight distribution. The pendant was heavier than it should be for its size. "May I?" he asked, pulling out his phone's flashlight. Lucy nodded, and Alexander examined the pendant more closely. There, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for, was a tiny seam along the edge. His hands shaking slightly, Alexander pressed his thumbnails into the barely there groove and twisted. With a soft click, the compass rose split in half, revealing a small cavity inside. Nestled within was a tightly rolled piece of paper and what appeared to be a small key. Lucy leaned forward, her eyes wide. "I never knew it could do that. What does the paper say?" Alexander carefully unrolled the tiny scroll. The message inside was brief, written in Sarah's familiar hand. "Safety deposit box, number 247, First National Bank of Boston. The truth is waiting." "Know that bank?" Alexander said, his mind racing. "It's where Sarah and I kept our important documents, but I never knew she had a separate box there." He looked at Lucy, seeing his own confusion and hope reflected in her eyes. "Would you like to come with me to find out what's inside?" Lucy nodded slowly. "But first, can I ask you something? Did Mama ever talk about me? Did she ever say why she gave me up?" Alexander's heart ached at the pain in her voice. "No, Lucy, she never told me about you. But I want you to know something. Sarah was the most loving, kind person I've ever known. Whatever her reasons were for keeping you a secret, I'm certain she thought she was protecting you. And now maybe we can finally understand why." He pulled out his phone and checked the time. "The bank opens in 2 hours. Why don't we stop by?" "My house first. You can get cleaned up and I have some of Sarah's old clothes that might fit you. Then we'll go together and find out what she left in that safety deposit box." Lucy considered his offer, her fingers tracing the now empty pendant. "Okay," she said finally. "But you have to promise me something. Promise you'll tell me everything. You know about my mama, even the bad stuff. I need to understand why she left me, why she never came back." "I promise," Alexander said solemnly, though inwardly he wondered how much of what he knew about Sarah was actually true. As they left the diner and headed toward his house, he couldn't shake the feeling that the safety deposit box would only lead to more questions. Questions whose answers might shatter what remained of his world. But looking at Lucy, seeing Sarah's determination in the set of her jaw, he knew he had no choice but to follow this path wherever it led. Sarah had left them both a trail of breadcrumbs, and they owed it to her and to themselves to discover where it ended. Alexander's brownstone loomed before them, its red brick facade a stark contrast to the grey morning sky. Lucy stood on the sidewalk, craning her neck to take in the full height of the building, her expression a mixture of awe and apprehension. "You live here?" she asked, clutching her worn backpack closer. "Just you?" "Yes," Alexander replied, leading her up the front steps. "Well, Sarah and I lived here together. Now it's—" He trailed off, inserting his key into the lock. "It's too big for one person, honestly." The door swung open to reveal a foyer that spoke of old money and refined taste. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors and antique furniture. Lucy's reflection multiplied in the gilt-framed mirrors lining the walls, making her appear even smaller and more out of place. "The bathroom is upstairs, first door on the right," Alexander said, trying to sound casual despite the surreal nature of the situation. "There are clean towels in the cabinet, and I'll bring you some of Sarah's old clothes." Lucy nodded, then hesitated. "Mr. Thorne, thank you for helping me, I mean. Most people just pretend they don't see me when I'm on the street." Alexander's throat tightened. How long had this child, Sarah's child, been living rough while he'd been searching for answers? "Lucy, you don't have to thank me, and please call me Alexander." As Lucy disappeared upstairs, Alexander made his way to the master bedroom. He hadn't entered Sarah's walk-in closet since she vanished, preferring to keep the door closed on her perfectly organized rows of designer clothing. Now he forced himself to step inside, running his fingers along the fabric of her dresses and sweaters. In a drawer, he found what he was looking for, some of Sarah's older clothes from before their marriage, when she'd been smaller. He selected a pair of jeans, a warm sweater, and a coat that would probably still be too big for Lucy, but would at least keep her warm. The sound of running water from the bathroom reminded him that time was passing. The bank would open soon, and with it, perhaps they would finally get some answers. He laid the clothes outside the bathroom door and went downstairs to make some calls. First, he phoned his assistant Janet to clear his schedule for the day. Then he called his private investigator, Mark Reynolds, who had been working Sarah's case since the beginning. "Mark, it's Alexander. I need you to run a background check on someone named Lucy Martinez. She's around 12 or 13 years old, probably in the foster system." He lowered his voice, though he could still hear the shower running upstairs. "And Mark, I need you to look into Sarah's history again, specifically the years before we met. There might be things we missed." As he hung up, he heard footsteps on the stairs. Lucy emerged, looking like a different person. Her dark hair was clean and combed, falling in waves past her shoulders. Sarah's clothes hung loose on her thin frame, but she had rolled up the sleeves and pant legs neatly. The compass rose pendant gleamed against the soft grey of the sweater. "I found this in the pocket," she said, holding out a small photograph. "Is it from your wedding?" Alexander took the photo, his heart clenching. It showed Sarah in her wedding dress standing in the garden behind the house. But unlike the professionally shot wedding photos that lined their hallway, this was a candid moment. Sarah was looking away from the camera, her expression pensive, almost sad. "Yes, that was our wedding day," he said, handing the photo back. "Sarah looked beautiful, didn't she?" "She looks worried," Lucy observed, studying the image, "like she's thinking about something that makes her sad." She glanced up at Alexander. "Was she happy when she was with you?" The question caught him off guard. Had Sarah been happy? He'd always thought so, but now he wondered how much of their life together had been real, and how much had been carefully constructed fiction. "I thought she was," he answered honestly. "But I'm beginning to realize there was a lot about Sarah. I didn't know. Come on, we should head to the bank." The drive to First National Bank of Boston was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Alexander couldn't help noticing how Lucy kept one hand on the door handle, as if ready to bolt at any moment. What had her life been like, he wondered, that such wariness had become second nature? The bank's imposing granite facade hadn't changed since the last time he'd been there with Sarah, discussing their joint accounts and investment portfolios. The security guard nodded in recognition as they entered, though his eyes lingered questioningly on Lucy. At the service desk, Alexander presented his ID and explained that he needed access to safety deposit box 247. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, tapped at her computer. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thorne, but that box isn't registered to you," she said. "It's in the name of Sarah Martinez Thorne." Alexander blinked at the hyphenated surname. Sarah had never used Martinez in any of their documents. "I'm her husband," he explained. "She's been missing for almost 3 years. I have copies of the police reports and our marriage certificate." The clerk's expression softened with recognition. "Oh yes, I remember the news stories. I'm very sorry, Mr. Thorne, but without a court order, or Mrs. Martinez Thorne herself present, I can't allow access to the box." "What about me?" Lucy stepped forward, pulling out the key from the pendant. "My name is Lucy Martinez. I'm her daughter." The clerk looked startled, her eyes darting between Lucy and Alexander. Let me check something." She disappeared into a back office, returning several minutes later with a folder. "Mrs. Martinez Thorne left specific instructions regarding this box," she said, reading from a document. "In the event of her absence, access was to be granted to a minor named Lucy Martinez upon presentation of a silver compass rose pendant and its contained key." She looked up at Lucy. "Do you have ID, young lady?" Lucy pulled her battered social services ID card from her backpack. The clerk examined it, compared it to something in her folder, and nodded. "Everything appears to be in order. Would you like to access the box now?" Alexander watched as Lucy was led to the vault area, his mind racing. Sarah had planned for this moment, had ensured that Lucy would be able to access whatever secrets she'd hidden away. But why? What could be so important that she'd gone to such lengths to protect it? The clerk returned with a large safety deposit box, placing it on a private viewing table. "I'll give you some privacy," she said, closing the door behind her. Lucy looked at Alexander, her hand hovering over the box. "Are you ready?" she asked. He nodded, though in truth he'd never felt less ready for anything in his life. Lucy inserted the key, turned it, and lifted the lid. The safety deposit box contained several manila envelopes, a USB drive, and a leather-bound journal. On top lay a letter addressed to "My dearest Lucy and Alexander." With trembling hands, Lucy opened the letter and began to read aloud. "If you're reading this together, then at least one part of my plan has worked. Lucy, my beautiful girl, I never wanted to leave you either time. Alexander, my love, I'm so sorry for the secrets I've kept. You both deserve the truth, and now I can finally give it to you. 13 years ago, I was a different person. My name was Sarah Martinez, and I worked as a data analyst for Carlton Industries. I discovered something in their financial records, something that powerful people wanted to keep hidden. They threatened me, told me I had to keep quiet or they would hurt the people I loved. Lucy was only a baby then. I couldn't risk her safety, so I made the hardest decision of my life. I placed her in foster care, changed my name, and tried to build a new life. But I never stopped watching over her from afar, never stopped loving her. Alexander, when I met you, I was still running from my past. I fell in love with your kindness, your integrity, your strength. I wanted to tell you everything so many times, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd look at me differently, afraid the truth would put you in danger too. But now they've found me again. The people I've been hiding from all these years, they discovered I'd been gathering evidence against them, preparing to expose their crimes. That's why I had to disappear, to protect you both while I finish what I started. In this box, you'll find everything you need to understand. The journal contains my full story, and the USB drive holds all the evidence I've collected. The other envelopes contain documents you'll need to protect yourselves and eventually to find me. But please be careful. Trust no one except Marcus Chen at the Boston Globe. He's been helping me build the case, and he'll know what to do with the evidence. Lucy, my brave girl, I'm so proud of the person you've become. Alexander, thank you for loving me, even the parts of me you didn't know existed. Together, you're stronger than anyone who might try to stop the truth from coming out. And all my love, Sarah. Lucy lowered the letter, her eyes shining with tears. She didn't abandon me, she whispered. She was protecting me. Alexander sat heavily in one of the viewing room's chairs, his world spinning. Carlton Industries, one of the largest corporations in Boston and one of his investment firm's major clients. How many times had he sat in meetings with Carlton's executives, never knowing they were the reason his wife lived in fear? "We should look at the other documents," he said, reaching for one of the manila envelopes. Inside he found legal papers, a revised will naming Lucy as Sarah's heir, documentation of a trust fund set up in Lucy's name, and most surprisingly, adoption papers with his name listed as the potential adoptive father. She thought of everything. Lucy said softly, paging through her mother's journal. "She's been planning this for years, hasn't she?" Alexander nodded, examining the USB drive. "She knew someday we'd need to understand." He looked at Lucy, seeing the same determination in her eyes that he'd so often seen in Sarah's. "The question is, what do we do now?" Lucy closed the journal carefully. "We do what Mama asked. We take this to Marcus Chen." She straightened her shoulders, looking suddenly older than her years. "But first, can we copy these documents? I don't want to risk losing anything." "Good thinking," Alexander agreed. He gathered everything back into the box, making sure nothing was left behind. "I know someone who can help us make your copies, but Lucy—" He hesitated, knowing what he was about to say would change everything. "You know you can't go back to living on the streets, right? It's not safe, especially now." Lucy twisted the compass rose pendant between her fingers, a gesture so like Sarah's that it made his heart ache. "Where else can I go? The foster home. Will just send me back into the system." "You could stay with me," Alexander said quietly. "Sarah left those adoption papers for a reason, and—" He smiled slightly. "I have it on good authority that the house is too big for one person." Lucy's eyes widened. "You'd want me? Even though you just found out about me today?" "You're Sarah's daughter," Alexander said simply. "That makes you family, and family sticks together, especially when there are mysteries to solve." A small smile tugged at Lucy's lips, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "Okay," she said, "but on one condition." "What's that?" "We don't stop looking for her, not until we find her and make sure she's safe." Alexander held out his hand solemnly. "Deal." As Lucy shook it, he felt something shift inside him, the hollow ache that had haunted him since Sarah's disappearance transforming into something else. Hope, yes, but also purpose. They left the bank together, the safety deposit box tucked securely in Alexander's briefcase. The morning sun had finally broken through the clouds, casting long shadows across the city streets. Somewhere out there, Sarah was waiting for them to unravel the puzzle she'd left behind. And this time Alexander wouldn't be searching alone. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through Alexander's home office as he sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of copied documents from Sarah's safety deposit box. Lucy was curled up in a leather armchair nearby, absorbed in her mother's journal, occasionally making notes in a spiral notebook she'd found in one of the desk drawers. "Alexander," she said, looking up from the journal, "did you ever hear Mom mention someone named Elena Vasquez?" He frowned, scanning his memory. "No, I don't think so. Why?" "She writes about her a lot in the early entries. They worked together at Carlton Industries." Lucy flipped back a few pages. "Listen to this. Elena was the one who first noticed the discrepancies. She said we had to be careful, that people who asked too many questions at Carlton had a way of disappearing. I didn't believe her then. I should have." Alexander's phone buzzed with an incoming text from his private investigator, Mark Reynolds. "Just got preliminary background on Lucy Martinez, born St. Mary's Hospital, Boston. Mother, Sarah Martinez. Father, unknown. Entered. Foster system age 2. Multiple placements. Current status listed as runaway. Also found interesting connection to Carlton Industries. Call me ASAP." "Lucy," Alexander said carefully, "would you be okay staying here with Janet for a little while? I need to meet with someone who might be able to help us understand what's going on." Lucy closed the journal, her expression guarded. "You're coming back, right?" The question broke his heart a little. How many times had this child been abandoned by adults who promised to return? Absolutely, he assured her. I'll bring back dinner. Chinese food, okay? She nodded, managing a small smile. Can I get sweet and sour chicken? Whatever you want. He turned to Janet, his assistant of 15 years, who had been quietly organizing the copied documents into labeled folders. Janet, I know this is way beyond your normal duties. Don't even finish that sentence, Janet interrupted. I've known Sarah for 7 years. If she's in trouble, I want to help. She smiled at Lucy. Besides, I think it's time someone showed this young lady how to properly use that amazing television in the media room. Alexander met Mark Reynolds at their usual spot, a quiet booth in the back of O'Malley's pub, where the dark wood paneling and low lighting discouraged eavesdroppers. The PI was already there, a thick folder on the table in front of him. Tell me everything, Alexander said, sliding into the booth. Mark opened the folder, spreading out several documents. Sarah Martinez graduated summa cum laude from MIT in 2010, degree in computer science and economics, hired by Carlton Industries right out of college as a junior data analyst, worked there until 2012, when she suddenly resigned and seemed to vanish. Next record I can find is from 2015, when Sarah Thorne, no Martinez, applied for a job at Boston Municipal Credit Union. What happened in those missing 3 years? That's where it gets interesting. Mark lowered his voice. I found sealed court records from 2012. Sarah Martinez was listed as a potential witness in a federal investigation into Carlton Industries. The case was suddenly dropped, all records sealed. Around the same time, 3 other Carlton employees went missing. Alexander's blood ran cold. Missing. Elena Vasquez, James Chen, and Michael O'Connor all worked in the same department as Sarah. All disappeared within 2 months of each other. None were ever found. James Chen, Alexander repeated. Any relation to Marcus Chen at the Boston Globe? Mark nodded grimly. His brother. Marcus has written several investigative pieces about Carlton Industries over the years, though nothing that directly linked them to the disappearances. He's been trying to prove something for a long time, but hasn't been able to make anything stick. Alexander thought of the USB drive from Sarah's safety deposit box, now safely locked in his home. Office safe. What about Lucy? What did you find? Birth certificate confirms she's Sarah's daughter. Father's name is listed as unknown. She was placed in foster care in 2012, right around the time Sarah disappeared the first time. Mark hesitated. There's something else. The judge who sealed the Carlton Industries case, Judge William Preston. He's on Carlton's board of directors now. A judge involved in sealing evidence ends up on the board of the company he protected. Alexander shook his head in disgust. How deep does this go? Deep enough that you need to be very careful, Mark warned. These people have already made 4 people disappear, 5 counting Sarah. They won't hesitate to add to that number if they think you're getting close to whatever they're hiding. Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from Janet. Lucy showed me something in Sarah's journal. You need to see. How soon can you get back? I have to go, he told Mark, standing up. But I need you to do something first. Find out everything you can about Elena Vasquez's disappearance and see if you can arrange a meeting with Marcus Chen, somewhere private. Alexander, Mark called as he turned to leave. Watch your back, and maybe think about upgrading your home security system. The drive home seemed to take forever, his mind racing with questions. What had Sarah and her colleagues discovered at Carlton Industries? Why had she waited so long to tell him the truth? And most importantly, was she still alive? He found Lucy and Janet in his office, the journal open between them on the desk. Lucy's face was pale, but her jaw was set in a determined line that reminded him so much of Sarah. Show him, she said to Janet. Janet turned the journal around so Alexander could see. Tucked between the pages was a photograph he'd never seen before. It showed Sarah with 3 other people, 2 women and a man, standing in what looked like an office break room. On the back, written in Sarah's neat hand, were 4 names and a date. Sarah Martinez, Elena Vasquez, James Chen, Michael O'Connor. Carlton Industries, May 15th, 2012. If anything happens to any of us, the truth is in the numbers. The last line was underlined twice. Alexander stared at the photograph, his fingers tracing the faces of the 4 people who had stumbled upon something dangerous enough to make them disappear. "The truth is in the numbers," he murmured. "Lucy, has your mother mentioned anything about numbers in her journal?" Lucy flipped through the pages, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Not directly, but there are weird sequences of numbers scattered throughout. I thought they were dates at first, but they don't make sense as dates." Janet leaned forward, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "May I?" she asked, reaching for the journal. As Alexander's assistant for 15 years, she had an almost supernatural ability to spot patterns in seemingly random data. "Look at this," she said after a few minutes. "These numbers appear multiple times, always in the margins. 41.8781 yen, 87.6298 W." She looked up at Alexander. "Those are coordinates." Alexander pulled out his phone and quickly entered the numbers into a mapping application. "Chicago," he said. "Downtown Chicago, to be exact." He zoomed in on the location. "It's pointing to the Carlton Industries headquarters." "There's more," Janet continued, turning pages. "Account numbers, transaction dates, amounts transferred." Sarah was tracking something specific. She grabbed a legal pad and began jotting down figures. "These transactions, they're all connected to a company called Horizon Ventures. Carlton's technology investment arm," Alexander said, his investment banker's mind clicking into gear. "They use it to fund startups and research projects." He paused, remembering something. "Wait a minute. Lucy, you said your mother was protecting something on a USB drive?" Lucy nodded, running to the safe where they'd stored the items from the safety deposit box. Alexander entered the combination and retrieved the drive, his hands shaking slightly as he plugged it into his laptop. The drive contained dozens of folders, each meticulously labeled with dates and transaction codes. But what caught his attention was a video file named "Watch This First, MP4." He clicked play, and Sarah's face filled the screen. She looked tired, her usual polish replaced by dark circles under her eyes and uncombed hair. The timestamp showed the video had been recorded just 2 days before she disappeared. "If you're watching this," she began, "then you found Lucy and the safety deposit box. I'm sorry for all the secrecy, but it was the only way to protect everyone. What we discovered at Carlton goes beyond simple corporate fraud. They're using Horizon Ventures to fund illegal experimental technology. Things that could change the course of human history if they fall into the wrong hands." She glanced over her shoulder, as if checking to make sure she was alone. Elena found the first proof in the accounting logs: strange payments to shell companies, massive transfers that didn't match any legitimate projects. When she started asking questions, they threatened her family. Then James discovered the test sites, hidden facilities where they were conducting their experiments. He was going to go public with the evidence, but they got to him first. Sarah's voice cracked. "Michael and I tried to gather enough evidence to take to the authorities, but the corruption goes too deep. The police, judges, even some federal agents. Carlton has bought them all. Michael disappeared 3 days after he told me he'd found proof linking Carlton's board of directors to the program." She leaned closer to the camera. "Everything you need is here on this drive. Transaction records, locations, names of everyone involved. But be careful who you trust with this information. Carlton has people everywhere, and they'll do anything to keep this quiet." The video ended abruptly, freezing on Sarah's worried face. Lucy reached out to touch the screen, her fingers trembling. "She knew they were coming for her," she whispered. "That's why she hid everything and made sure I'd be able to find it." Alexander was about to respond when Janet suddenly grabbed his arm. "Listen," she hissed. In the silence that followed, they heard it. The soft sound of footsteps on the front porch, too quiet to be someone making a normal approach to the house. "Lucy," Alexander said quietly, "go with Janet through the back stairs. There's a panic room in the basement. Sarah insisted on having it installed when we bought the house. I never understood why, until now." "What about you?" Lucy's green eyes were wide with fear. "I'll be right behind you. I just need to grab something first." He waited until Janet had hustled Lucy toward the concealed door that led to the back stairs, then quickly disconnected the USB drive and slipped it into his pocket. The sound of breaking glass came from the front of the house. Alexander's heart pounded as he quickly gathered Sarah's journal and the most crucial documents, shoving them into his briefcase. The sound of footsteps grew closer, multiple sets now, moving with practiced precision through his home. He slipped through the hidden door just as shadows appeared in the hallway outside his office. The narrow stairwell was dark, lit only by dim emergency lights along the baseboards. Alexander descended as quietly as possible, hearing muffled voices above him. At the bottom of the stairs, Janet was waiting by the open panic room door, ushering him inside. The panic room was a stark contrast to the rest of the house, all steel and concrete, with banks of monitors showing feeds from security cameras throughout the property. Lucy sat in front of the main console, her eyes wide as she watched black-clad figures methodically searching the house. "They're looking for something specific," Janet whispered, pointing to one of the screens. The intruders were checking drawers and files, but not touching the valuable artwork or electronics. "They must know about the safety deposit box." Alexander pulled out his phone to call the police, then hesitated. Sarah's warning echoed in his mind. Carlton has people everywhere. Who could they trust? "Janet," he said quietly, "does your brother still work at the Four Seasons?" She nodded. "He's the night manager." "Why?" "Because we need somewhere safe to go. Somewhere not connected to me." He turned to Lucy, who was clutching Sarah's compass rose pendant. "Are you okay?" "I'm scared," she admitted, "but also angry. These people hurt my mom, made her hide who she was. They're why I grew up without her." Alexander squeezed her shoulder. "I promise you we're going to fix this, but first we need to get out of here safely." He pointed to a screen showing the garage. "There's a service tunnel that connects to the next street. Sarah had it built when we renovated. Another thing that makes more sense now." On the monitors, they watched as the intruders reached Alexander's office. One of them spoke into a radio, and though they couldn't hear the words, the frustrated body language was clear. Whatever they were looking for wasn't there. "Now's our chance," Alexander said. "They're focused on the upper floors." He opened a cabinet and pulled out 3 backpacks, another of Sarah's preparations. Each contained cash, a burner phone, and basic supplies. They slipped into the tunnel, which was narrow but tall enough to walk through comfortably. The air was cool and damp, smelling faintly of earth. After about 50 yards, they reached a steel door with a keypad. The code is Lucy's birthday, Alexander realized, remembering how Sarah had insisted on this specific combination. He entered the numbers, and the door opened onto a quiet side street 2 blocks from their house. Janet's brother James was waiting for them in the hotel's service entrance, his face grave. "I've arranged a secure suite," he said, leading them through back corridors. "No record of the reservation, and I'm the only one with access to this floor tonight." The suite was on the top floor with windows overlooking the city. As soon as they were safely inside, Alexander began spreading out the documents they'd managed to save, while Janet made secure calls on one of the burner phones. "Mark's on his way," she reported, "and I reached out to Marcus Chen through a secure channel. He wants to meet tomorrow morning." Lucy, who had been quiet since they left the house, suddenly spoke up. "Alexander, there's something in Mom's journal I think you should see." She opened the book to a page marked with a thin ribbon. It's about the day she disappeared. Alexander sat beside her on the plush hotel sofa as she began to read. "My dearest Lucy and Alexander, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened. Carlton's people have found me, but what they don't know is that I've already set everything in motion. The evidence is scattered in places they'll never think to look, hidden in plain sight through the city we all love. The compass rose isn't just a necklace. It's a key to understanding the pattern. Each point represents a location where I've hidden part of the truth. North points to the final piece, the one that will bring down everything they've built on lies and corruption. Alexander, my love, you already have one piece. though you don't know it yet. Remember our first date? The restaurant where you spilled wine on your tie and I told you it was a sign we were meant to be together. Go back there, ask for the old menu from that night. What you find will lead you to the next step. Lucy, my brave girl, your part is just as important. The stories I used to tell you about the princess who could see things others couldn't, they weren't just bedtime tales. You have a gift for seeing patterns just like I do. Trust your instincts, they'll help guide the way. But be careful. Carlton's reach is long and they have eyes everywhere. Trust no one except each other. And remember, sometimes the best place to hide something is in someone else's shadow. All my love, Sarah. Alexander's mind raced. Their first date had been at La Maison d'Or, an elegant French restaurant in Back Bay. He remembered everything. About that night, Sarah's black dress, the way she'd laughed when he'd knocked over the wine glass, the connection he'd felt with her immediately. I know that look, Janet said. Are you figured something out? Maybe, Alexander replied, but first we need to make sure we're not walking into a trap. Lucy, your mother mentioned patterns. What do you see in all of this? Lucy studied the journal entry again, her brow furrowed in concentration. She keeps mentioning things hidden in plain sight and shadows, and look at how she wrote this. Some letters are slightly darker than others, like she pressed harder on certain ones. Janet leaned in, adjusting her reading glasses. She's right. If we isolate just the darker letters... She grabbed a notepad and began copying them down. A sharp knock at the door made them all freeze. James's voice called out the prearranged signal. Room service for suite 1242. Alexander moved to open the door, but Lucy grabbed his arm. Wait, she whispered. Mom's note said to trust no one except each other. How do we know it's really James? Alexander moved silently to the door's peephole, studying the figure in the hallway. It was indeed Janet's brother, but he wasn't alone. Mark Reynolds stood beside him, along with a third man Alexander didn't recognize, tall, Asian with silver threading through his dark hair. It's James and Mark, he reported quietly. But there's someone else with them. Janet peered through the peephole and gasped softly. That's Marcus Chen. I'd recognize him from his byline photo in the Globe. Alexander considered their options. If this was Marcus Chen, he was exactly who they needed to see. But if it wasn't... He looked at Lucy, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in her eyes. Ask them a question, Lucy suggested. Something only the real people would know. Alexander nodded and called through the door. Mark, what was the first case you ever worked for me? Finding your wife's lost cat, Mark replied without hesitation. The one that turned out to be sleeping in your neighbor's greenhouse the whole time. It was true. Sarah's beloved Persian cat had disappeared for 3 days, leading to Alexander's first encounter with the private investigator. He turned to Janet. Your brother? She stepped forward. Jimmy, what did Dad always say about the Red Sox? They'll break your heart 9 ways to Sunday, but they're still our team, James answered, and Janet nodded. It was their father's favorite phrase. Alexander opened the door, but kept the security chain engaged. Mr. Chen, prove you're who you say you are. The man stepped forward, his expression grave. My brother James worked with your wife at Carlton Industries. He disappeared in 2012, but not before he told me about Project Horizon. Sarah contacted me 6 months ago with evidence that could expose everything. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd help the people who brought me physical proof of the project. Alexander glanced at the USB drive in his pocket. What kind of proof? Transaction records, Chen replied. Account numbers starting with HV7249 and video testimony from the original whistleblowers. It matched the contents of the drive. Exactly. Alexander closed the door, removed the chain and let them in. Once they were all settled in the suite's sitting area, Marcus Chen revealed why he'd come early. My sources inside Carlton are reporting unusual activity. They've mobilized their entire security division, and they're searching for something, or someone, with unprecedented urgency. They know we have the evidence, Alexander said. Chen nodded grimly. But that's not all. One of my contacts overheard something about a contingency protocol being activated. Whatever that means, it has their top executives scared. Lucy, who had been quietly examining her mother's journal again, suddenly sat up straight. "The letters!" she exclaimed. "Look what they spell out." Janet took the notepad where she'd copied the darker letters from Sarah's message. Arranged properly, they formed a clear warning. Horizon failsafe 48 hours. "Today's date," Lucy continued, flipping through the journal's pages. "Mom wrote about it here. If they ever activate the failsafe, it means they're preparing to erase everything. All the evidence, all the witnesses, all the loose ends. They'll do it within 48 hours of activation." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Carlton Industries wasn't just trying to recover Sarah's evidence. They were preparing to eliminate every trace of their illegal activities, including anyone who knew about them. "How long ago was the protocol activated?" Alexander asked Chen. The journalist checked his phone. "According to my source, approximately 6 hours ago. Then we have 42 hours to find Sarah and expose everything before they can complete their cover-up," Alexander said. He turned to Lucy. "Your mother left us a trail to follow, the restaurant from our first date, La Maison d'Or. That's where we start." "It's too dangerous," Mark protested. "They'll be watching all the places connected to you and Sarah." "That's exactly why we need to go," Lucy said, her voice stronger than Alexander had ever heard it. "Mom wrote that the best place to hide something is in someone else's shadow. She hid the evidence in places they would expect to find it, knowing they'd look too hard for secret hiding spots to notice what was right in front of them." Marcus Chen smiled slightly. "She's definitely Sarah's daughter." He pulled out a laptop and opened it. "I have press credentials and contacts throughout the city. We can use that as cover to move around without attracting attention." James spoke up from his position by the window, where he'd been keeping watch. "I can have a hotel. Car ready in 10 minutes. One of our regular drivers, he's trustworthy." Alexander looked around the room at their unlikely alliance. A journalist seeking justice for his brother, a hotel manager protecting his sister, a private investigator who'd never given up the search, and a young girl who'd inherited her mother's sharp mind and determination. 42 hours, he said. "Let's make them count." La Maison d'Or stood elegant and timeless in the early morning light, its brass fixtures gleaming and white tablecloths visible through the windows. Alexander and Lucy sat in Marcus Chen's inconspicuous sedan across the street, watching as the restaurant staff prepared for the day ahead. "Mom wrote about this place in her journal," Lucy said, flipping through the worn pages. "Not just about your first date, but other times too. She said it was where she first realized she could trust you completely." Alexander smiled sadly, remembering countless dinners shared with Sarah at their favorite corner table. "The owner, Philippe, he always kept that table open for us, even on busy nights." His expression shifted as a thought struck him. "Philippe, he's known Sarah almost as long as I have." Marcus, who had been pretending to work on his laptop in the driver's seat, looked up. "Could he be involved?" "No," Alexander said firmly. "He's a good man, and more importantly, Sarah trusted him. She wouldn't have pointed us here if she didn't think it was safe." They watched as an elderly man in an impeccable suit unlocked the restaurant's front door. Even from across the street, Alexander recognized Philippe's distinctive silver hair and proud bearing. "I'll go first," Marcus said, gathering his press credentials. "I'm doing a piece on historic Boston restaurants. If anyone's watching, they'll see a routine interview." He glanced at Alexander. "Give me 10 minutes, then come in separately. Lucy should wait here with Janet." "No way," Lucy protested. "Mom's note said we need to trust our instincts, and mine say I need to be in there." Alexander studied her determined expression, so like Sarah's, and nodded. "She comes with me. Janet, stay with the car. If anything seems wrong, I'll call in the cavalry," Janet assured him, patting the burner phone in her pocket. 10 minutes later, Alexander and Lucy walked into La Maison d'Or. Marcus was already seated with Philippe, recording what appeared to be a genuine interview about the restaurant's history. The elderly restaurateur looked up as they entered, and Alexander saw the flash of recognition in his eyes. "Monsieur Thorne," Philippe said, rising from his seat, "it has been too long." His gaze fell on Lucy, and something flickered across. His face, surprise, perhaps even understanding. "Philippe," Alexander greeted him warmly. "I was hoping, well, this might sound strange, but do you still have the menu from October 12th, 2015? The old man's expression didn't change, but Alexander noticed his hand trembling slightly as he set down his espresso cup. "Your first date with the lovely Madame Sarah. A special night." He gestured to one of his waiters. "Jean-Luc, please bring the special archive from my office." While they waited, Philippe insisted they sit at their table. As Lucy slid into the booth, she suddenly grabbed Alexander's arm. "Look," she whispered, pointing to the ornate wallpaper beside them. There, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it, was a tiny compass rose-drawn in silver ink. Jean-Luc returned with a leather-bound album. Philippe opened it reverently, turning to a specific page. "Here we are, October 12th, 2015. He slid the album across the table. The menu was there, preserved between sheets of clear plastic, but tucked into the corner was something else. A small envelope, yellowed with age, with Alexander's name written in Sarah's distinctive handwriting. "She came to me 6 months ago," Philippe said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Asked me to keep this safe, to give it only to you if you came asking about that specific night." He glanced around the nearly empty restaurant. "What she discovered, it is bigger than any of us imagined." Alexander opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single playing card, the Queen of Hearts. On its face, Sarah had written a series of numbers. "Coordinates," Marcus said, leaning in. "And is that a safe deposit box number?" Lucy studied the card, her head tilted. "Wait," she said. "Hold it up to the light." Alexander did, and gasped softly. Visible only when backlit was an intricate pattern of dots and dashes. Morse code. "You're Sarah," Philippe said. She was brilliant. She knew they would be watching, that they would expect elaborate hiding places and high-tech solutions. So she used the oldest tricks in the book, hidden in plain sight, where modern eyes wouldn't think to look. A commotion at the front of E. The restaurant made them all turn. 2 men in dark suits had entered, their bearing unmistakably professional security. As they scanned the dining room, Philippe smoothly slid the album under the table. "The wine cellar," he murmured. "Through the kitchen, second door on the left. There's an old delivery tunnel that comes out 3 blocks away." He stood, smiling broadly. "Gentlemen, welcome to La Maison d'Or. How many for breakfast?" Alexander grabbed Lucy's hand and they slipped toward the kitchen while Philippe distracted the men with an enthusiastic description of the day's specials. Marcus followed close behind, his press credentials ready in case they were spotted. The kitchen staff barely glanced at them as Philippe's head chef waved them through. Clearly, they had been prepared for this possibility. The wine cellar door opened silently, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. "You're Sarah," Philippe's voice drifted down to them as they hurried down the stairs. "She said to tell you, sometimes a queen's heart holds more than just love." Lucy squeezed Alexander's hand. "Mom loved puzzles and codes. She's leaving us a trail, but she's making sure only we can follow it." Alexander clutched the playing card as they navigated the dimly lit tunnel. "Then let's make sure we don't lose the path. We've got 38 hours left to find her." The tunnel emerged behind a defunct bakery, its boarded-up windows providing perfect cover for their exit. Janet was waiting with the car engine running, and they piled in quickly. As they pulled away, Alexander saw the 2 men from the restaurant emerging onto the street, speaking urgently into their phones. "The card," Lucy said, holding out her hand. "Let me look at it again." Alexander passed her the Queen of Hearts, and she studied it intently, while Marcus used his phone to decode the Morse code message they'd discovered. "The coordinates point to the Boston Public Library," Marcus reported. "The safe deposit box number is from Eastern Bank's downtown branch." "There's something else," Lucy said, turning the card over repeatedly in her hands. "Look at the pattern in her dress." She pointed to the Queen's ornate gown, where subtle variations in the traditional design formed what appeared to be a sequence of numbers. Janet pulled out her reading glasses and peered at the card. Those aren't just numbers, they're dates. And the second one is today's date. What's the first? Date? Alexander asked. September 15th, 2012, Lucy read, the day Mom had to give me up. The car fell silent. Alexander watched Lucy's reflection in the window as she traced the outline of the Queen's face with her finger. Despite everything they'd discovered, despite all the danger, he hadn't seen her look this vulnerable since they'd first met. She never wanted to leave you, he said softly. Everything she did was to protect you. Lucy nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I know, and now we're going to help her finish what she started. She straightened in her seat, her moment of sadness replaced by determination. The library or the bank? Which one first? Marcus checked his phone. The library opens in 20 minutes. The bank's already open, but it'll be busier. More eyes watching. Library first, Alexander decided. Sarah would have known we'd need information before we could act. He turned to Janet. Can you and James get access to the bank's security feeds? We need to know what we're walking into. Janet was already texting her brother. He knows someone in their IT department. Give us an hour. The Boston Public Library stood majestically against the morning sky, its marble facade glowing in the early sunlight. As they approached the entrance, Lucy suddenly stopped. The lions, she said, pointing to the famous stone statues flanking the steps. Mum used to tell me stories about them. She said they were guardians of knowledge, that they protected all the library's secrets. She walked to the base of one statue, running her hand along the weathered stone. Here, carved into the base, nearly worn away by decades of weather, was another tiny compass rose. Inside, the library was just beginning to fill with students and researchers. Marcus split off, pretending to interview the staff about the library's history, while Alexander and Lucy made their way to the coordinates Sarah had specified. They led to the rare book room, where a stern-faced librarian regarded them suspiciously, until Alexander explained they were researching his wife's family history. The coordinates pointed them to a specific shelf, where leather-bound volumes lined the walls in neat rows. The numbers in the Morse code, Lucy whispered. They're not just coordinates, they're a catalogue reference. Alexander found the volume, a 19th-century book on Boston's maritime history. As he pulled it from the shelf, something fluttered to the floor. Another playing card, this time the Queen of Diamonds. Lucy picked it up, holding it to the light just as they had done with the first card. More Morse code appeared, along with another set of coordinates. But it was the handwritten message on the face that made Alexander's breath catch. My dearest loves, if you're reading this, you're getting closer. The evidence isn't just documents and data, it's people, survivors of Project Horizon, hidden throughout the city. Find them and you'll find me. The bank holds their stories. The diamonds point to their sanctuary, but be careful. The same people who are hunting me will be watching both places. Lucy, remember the story about the princess in the tower, how she escaped using the birds to carry her messages. Sometimes the best way to hide is to make them think they've already found what they're looking for. Alexander, my heart, you always said I was too careful, too cautious. Now you know why. Trust Lucy's instincts. She sees patterns just like I do. And remember the night you proposed? The real reason I said yes wasn't the ring or the romantic setting. It was because you looked at me and said, I don't just love who you are, I love who you're becoming. I've held on to those words through all of this. Time is running out. They know you're getting close. Be ready. All my love, Sarah. Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from Janet. Bank cameras accessed. You need to see this now. He showed the message to Lucy, who was still studying the Queen of Diamonds. She looked up at him, her expression a mixture of fear and resolve. Mom's alive, she said. She's telling us she's alive, and she needs our help. Whatever's in that bank, we have to get to it before they do. Alexander nodded, carefully tucking both playing cards into his pocket. Then let's go find out what's so important about safety deposit box 247. He checked his watch. 36 hours left? Let's make them count. Janet's message had included a series of screenshots from the bank's security cameras. The images showed a familiar figure entering the bank just 20 minutes earlier. Sarah. She looked different, thinner, her hair shorter and darker, but it was unmistakably her. She's leading them away, Lucy said, studying the images on Alexander's phone as they hurried toward Eastern Bank. Look at how she made sure the cameras caught her face. She wants them to follow her. While we get to the safety deposit box, Alexander finished. He glanced at Marcus, who was coordinating with his contacts through encrypted messages. What are we walking into? Carlton's security teams are converging on the bank, Marcus reported grimly. But they're focused on the main entrance where Sarah was spotted. There's a service entrance through the building next door. The bank staff uses it during renovations. Janet's voice crackled through their earpieces. Security feed shows the vault area is clear. Whatever Sarah put in motion has their attention focused upstairs. They split up outside the bank. Marcus headed for the main entrance, his press credentials ready, preparing to create a distraction if needed. Alexander and Lucy slipped through a side alley to the service entrance, where James was waiting with a maintenance worker's uniform. Cards from this morning's sweep, James said, handing Alexander an ID badge. It'll get you into the vault. It's area, but you'll only have a few minutes before someone notices it's been used twice. Lucy tugged at Alexander's sleeve. What about me? Alexander looked at the maintenance cart James had prepared with its collection of cleaning supplies and folded towels. Think you can stay hidden under those towels for a few minutes? She nodded, climbing into the cart and allowing James to cover her with the linens. Alexander pushed the cart through the service entrance, his heart pounding but his movements deliberately casual. The few bank employees they passed barely glanced at them, just another maintenance worker going about his routine. The vault area required 2 separate card swipes. Alexander held his breath as he used the borrowed ID, but the lights turned. Green and the heavy doors swung open. Once inside, Lucy emerged from her hiding place, and they quickly located box 247. The key from the pendant, Alexander said. It has to be the one. Lucy's hands trembled slightly as she fitted the key into the lock. Inside the box, they found a single USB drive and an envelope containing what looked like medical records. Project Horizon test subjects, Lucy read from one of the documents. They were experimenting on people, kids like me, born with unusual cognitive abilities. She looked up at Alexander, her eyes wide. Mom wasn't just an accountant who found suspicious numbers. She was protecting us, the children they were using for their experiments. A noise from the vault entrance made them both freeze. Footsteps were approaching, multiple sets, moving with purpose. In here, Alexander whispered, pulling Lucy into a narrow space between 2 rows of safety deposit boxes. Through a small gap, they watched as 3 men in suits entered the vault area, led by a distinguished-looking older man Alexander recognized from Carlton Industries board meetings. Judge William Preston. Find that box, Preston ordered. Whatever Sarah Thorne left behind, we need it. Destroyed before... He broke off as his phone buzzed. What, she's where? He listened for a moment, his face darkening. How did she access the research facility? Never mind. Lock down the building. No one gets in or out until we have her. The pie. Men hurried out, leaving Alexander and Lucy alone in the vault. They looked at each other, understanding dawning simultaneously. Mom's at their research facility, Lucy said. The coordinates on the Queen of Diamonds. That's where they're really keeping everything. Alexander quickly photographed all the documents with his phone before returning them to the box. She wanted them to chase her there. But why? Lucy pulled out the Queen of Diamonds, studying it again. Look at the pattern in the background. It's not just decoration, it's a floor plan, and these numbers along the edge, they're not coordinates, they're timestamps. Alexander's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Sarah spotted entering Carlton Research Facility in Brookline. All security teams redirecting there. Whatever you're going to do, do it fast. She's giving us a window, Alexander realized. While they're focused on catching her, we can get to what they're really protecting. He checked his watch. 28 hours until their fail-safe protocol completes. We need to move now. They slipped out of the vault and back to the service entrance where James was waiting anxiously. As they drove toward the coordinates Lucy had decoded, Alexander shared everything they'd found with Marcus and Janet through their secure channel. "The research facility is a front," Lucy explained, poring over the documents they'd photographed. "The real Project Horizon labs are underneath, in old Cold War bunkers. That's where they're keeping everything, the test subjects, the research data, all of it." "And that's where Sarah's been hiding for the past 6 months," Alexander added. "Not running away, but working from the inside to shut them down." Lucy grabbed his arm suddenly. "Alexander, look at this." She pointed to a section of the medical records. "These test subjects, and they're not just random kids, they're all connected. Siblings, cousins." She swallowed hard. Mom wasn't just investigating Carlton Industries. She was trying to find her family, my family. The implications hit Alexander like a physical blow. Sarah hadn't just discovered corporate corruption, she'd uncovered a conspiracy that reached into her own past, her own blood. And now she was about to expose it all, if they could just reach her in time. "Janet," he said into his earpiece, "we need everything you can find on the security systems at these coordinates. And Marcus, get your team ready. When this breaks, it's going to be the biggest story of your career." Lucy held the Queen of Diamonds up to the window, letting the sunlight illuminate the hidden patterns Sarah had left for them to find. "We're coming, Mom," she whispered. "Just hold on a little longer." The research facility's public entrance was a modern glass and steel building bearing Carlton Industries' logo. But according to Sarah's floor plan, the real entrance they needed was hidden in plain sight, a maintenance door in the adjacent parking structure, protected by a keypad that would accept the numerical code hidden in the Queen of Diamonds pattern. Lucy decoded it within seconds. "Mom always said I had a gift for patterns," she explained as the door clicked open. "Now I know why. All those kids in the files, we're all like her. We see things others don't." They descended a long concrete stairwell, following Sarah's detailed map. Above them, they could hear the commotion as security teams searched the main building, still chasing the ghost of Sarah's appearance. Janet's voice guided them through their earpieces, while Marcus coordinated with his news team, ready to broadcast everything once they had the evidence secured. The lower level was eerily quiet, its fluorescent-lit corridors stark and institutional. Following Lucy's lead, they navigated through the maze-like complex, avoiding security cameras using the blind spots Sarah had marked on her map. They found the central data center exactly where the floor plan indicated. Alexander used the key card they'd obtained from the bank vault. Sarah had left it there knowing they'd need it for this moment. Inside, servers hummed quietly, storing all of Project Horizon's secrets. "Mom left instructions," Lucy said, pulling out the Queen of Diamonds again. Hidden in the card's intricate design was a series of commands, everything they needed to access and download the project's complete database. Alexander kept watch while Lucy worked at the main terminal, her fingers flying over the keyboard, with inherited skill. On the screens above them, Project Horizon's true nature was revealed. Decades of identifying and collecting children with extraordinary cognitive abilities, using them to develop predictive algorithms and advanced pattern recognition systems that could be weaponized for corporate and political control. "Found her!" Lucy exclaimed suddenly. She pointed to a security feed showing a lower level they hadn't known existed. There was Sarah, very much alive, working at a computer terminal surrounded by what appeared to be other test subjects, children and adults of various ages, all wearing the same grey uniforms. "She wasn't running," Alexander breathed. "She was gathering them all in one place, protecting them until we could expose everything." Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. On the security feeds, they watched Judge Preston and his security team, realizing they'd been deceived, rushing toward the lower levels. "Time to go," Alexander said, but Lucy shook her head. "Not without Mom, and not without them." She pointed to the others with Sarah. "They're my family too, all of them." Alexander touched his earpiece. "Marcus, how close is your team?" 2 minutes out. Police and FBI right behind us. Your evidence triggered everything Sarah set up months ago. Carlton Industries stock is already crashing, as the first reports hit the wire. They ran toward the lower level, following Lucy's instincts through the maze of corridors. Behind them, they could hear security teams shouting, but it didn't matter anymore. Sarah's plan was already in motion. They found her in a large room, filled with computer equipment and makeshift living quarters. When she saw them, her eyes filled with tears. "You did it," she whispered, pulling them both into a fierce embrace. "You followed my trail, just like I knew you would." "Mom," Lucy choked out, clinging to her. "I knew you didn't abandon me. I knew it." "Never," Sarah said fiercely. "Everything I did was to protect you, all of you." She gestured to the others in the room, who were watching with a mixture of hope and fear. "They've been helping me gather evidence, working from the inside to expose everything." The door burst open and Judge Preston entered with his security team, weapons drawn. But he froze at the sight of dozens of cameras broadcasting live from the doorway. Marcus Chen and his news team had arrived just in time. "It's over, William," Sarah said calmly. "The world knows everything now. About Project Horizon, about the children you've been exploiting, about all of it." Preston's face contorted with rage, but before he could speak, FBI agents swarmed into the room, led by a familiar face, Mark Reynolds, who apparently had more credentials than just private investigator. In the chaos that followed, arrests being made, statements taken, families reunited, Alexander held Sarah and Lucy close, marveling at how his world had expanded and shifted in just 48 hours. "I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you everything from the beginning," Sarah said softly to Alexander. "I needed to keep you both safe until we could expose it all." "You did the right thing," he assured her. "And now?" "What happens now?" Sarah smiled, touching the compass rose pendant that Lucy still wore. "Now we build something new together, all of us." She looked around at the other families being reunited, at the children and adults who had been part of Project Horizon. No more secrets, no more hiding, just truth and healing and hope. Lucy leaned against her mother, her eyes bright with tears and joy. "Can we go home now?" "Yes," Sarah said, taking both their hands. "We can all go home." As they emerged from the facility into the bright afternoon sunlight, reporters clamoring for statements and cameras flashing around them, Alexander looked at his expanded family, Sarah's brilliant mind and fierce protective love, Lucy's remarkable gifts and resilient spirit, and all the others they had helped free from Project Horizon's shadow. He understood now what Sarah had meant in her letter about loving who someone was becoming. Their story wasn't ending, it was just beginning. The end, dear viewers. We hope Sarah, Alexander, and Lucy's journey has touched your hearts. Their story reminds us that love, truth, and family can overcome any obstacle. To continue experiencing powerful stories that explore the complexities of human connection and courage, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the like button below. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what moments resonated most with you. And stay tuned for more captivating narratives that remind us that even in our darkest moments, hope and love can light the way forward. Until our next story, thank you for being part of this incredible journey.